Now, I'm incredibly excited because today at 6 o'clock is going to be the premiere of a film that Crossover has been collaborating and co-producing along with the Sheffield Doc Fest. It's a film called From the Sea to the Land Beyond that uses 100 years of archive from the British Film Institute collection to make a new film directed by Penny Wilcock with a soundtrack that's been specially commissioned by the band British Sea Power. Now, this project was actually commissioned through The Space. The Space is the most significant digital arts project announced in Britain this year. And we've got a number of people from The Space to actually tell us what that is and to present some examples of different projects from The Space. So could we have the whole Space team come forward, please?
I'm just going to say I'm Susanna Simons, and very crucially, I'm the moderator rather than the chairman of this particular session. But I'm also head of development for The Space, and indeed am embarking on the process of doing the all-important evaluation as to what it is, how it's worked, what we've learnt during the 6 months of this particular part of the project. I'm assuming that some of you know about what it is, but also assuming that a lot of you don't know what it is. So in a moment we're going to show you a film which just gives you a brief outline. Because, Mark was very kindly talking about how important The Space was. As far as we're concerned, it's a voyage of discovery as we endeavour to find out just how to develop skills within the arts sector, to create something new between the collision, really, of art and technology, to create something special, and also to really drill down and see where the audience for the arts online is, how long they stay, who they are, and whether by putting this material onto different platforms, you can actually find a new audience for the arts, particularly amongst the young. If you think that this is a cross-platform proposition, that it is there on iPads and mobile phones, do you change things by taking great artwork into the space where they are, as opposed to expecting them to come to you? So I'm going to introduce the panel in a moment, but first, thanks to Tom, we will have a short film. So shall I? Yeah? Is that working?
We are Gilbert and George, and this is The Space.
For the next 6 months, across the biggest summer of arts the UK has ever seen, The Space will bring the arts to you wherever you are. Available on computers, smartphones, tablets, and connected TVs, The Space is a new way to access and enjoy the arts. Free, live and on demand. Street dance at Breakin Convention at Sadler's Wells. David Shrigley's opera from South Bank Centre. Stockhausen's helicopter string quartet in Birmingham.
I hear helicopters which annoy me all the time. But in my dream, they became musical instruments.
Every one of Shakespeare's plays performed by 37 different international companies from the Globe Theatre. The Space will grow to offer hundreds of hours of digital content from artists and arts organisations across the UK. There's also classic archive from the BBC, BFI and Arts Council to set the scene.
Drama is life, with the dull bits cut out.
There'll be interactive content like a virtual tour of John Peel's record collection, and The Space will be a platform for artists themselves to experiment.
I'm talking about things going up on the Space website in advance of the text having been written. I'm needing to talk to people about my own ideas about where I might be going with this piece before I've written the piece. So it's become a kind of exercise in extended collaboration on thought in real time.
The Space, a new home for the arts this summer, live, free and on demand.
Right, well, there's the background to it. That's a bit of what it looks like and some details of some of the things that are in it. But first, I'm going to introduce Rowley Keating, who's Director of Archive Content at the BBC and the man who crucially wrote the first side of A4, which outlined our aspirations of what this project could and should be. So, Rowley, just initially, when you wrote that side of A4, what were you hoping we were going to achieve?
Oh, that's a very specific question. Well, let me try and explain some of the origins myth of this, because that's always a good place to begin. Because it was there was the side of A4 moment, but it was born, I guess, out of years of conversations. Actually, some of them probably in this very room and in many other places as well. Which were based around the idea that, certainly as between a broadcaster and the production sector, the BBC looking out to the world, the wider world, it felt digital was bringing a whole new digital content creation sector into being around the arts, cultural industries, cultural organisations. And a lot of the arts partners we were talking with were seeing themselves increasingly half like independent producers, half like creative artists with a whole new medium to play with. And we've been tussling with this idea for years. But we did, and Susanna, you've played a part in this, we already at the BBC had a long-standing partnership with the Arts Council to try and work together. And if we're being honest, we were feeling our way for very concrete things to bring that to life. It did become clear, though, that at the very least there was something around digital skills that was concrete and real. And a couple of years ago, we set up a programme through the BBC Academy called Building Digital Capacity in the Arts, whereby the BBC would start opening out some of its techniques, skills, understandings of the media and sharing them with arts organisations. All well and good, a very, very good project, very worthwhile. And that was launched, I think, in March of last year. And I guess that was the moment, and I probably do take some blame or credit for this, because as some of you will know, I'm an old channel controller, among other things, and I get frustrated if there's not something audience-facing coming out of activities like this. And it was just a moment then when I did... Indeed, this was indeed the format that we used. It's not exactly this piece of paper, but that's the correct analogue format that was used to express the idea. And we distilled in one page, and I shared it with Alan Davey, who runs the Arts Council, a provocation in a way to both organisations. We said next summer, now this summer, 2012, was going to be the season, probably in post-war British history, when more money, energy, public money, was going to be going into the arts of all kinds, the length and breadth of the UK. Some of it was going to end up on radio and telly, but frankly, not all of it by any means, most of it not. And yet we're swimming now in digital potential and capacity. How about we conjure something for 6 months only as a temporary, vivid public experiment that would bring our organisation and Arts Council and other partners together to create something that was available to audiences, that did actively attempt to capture more and more of that energy during that incredible summer, that would be free at the point of use, that would be on as many platforms as it possibly could be, that would have some television-y aspects to it, but was fundamentally exploiting the freedom of digital. In other words, it wouldn't be scheduled in a conventional way. Durations could be 3 minutes, 3 hours, 2 days if you wanted them to be. So we'd have that freedom, and it wouldn't even just be video-based. You could play around with other formats. And the simple thought of the idea is that Arts Council would liberate some of their digital innovation funding to actually create content and be responsible for what was on it. The BBC would contribute resources, expertise, production skills, editorial, and would help create the technical platform for it. It was, at a time when we were facing the Olympics, it was a slightly quixotic idea, but suffice to say, within 6 months, we had persuaded the respective boards of both organisations that this was worth taking a punt on. This was not an easy thing to do, but Mark Thompson, Liz Fogg and others, to their credit, took that leap. And we then had about 6 months from Greenlight last autumn to build a technical platform from scratch, to work with Arts Council to create a grant-giving fund to organisations all over the country, including Sheffield Dockfest, I'm pleased to say, to create either completely bespoke pieces for it or adaptations, relays, coverage. We talked about the Globe Theatre for the space. And it went live in a sort of soft launch way on the 1st of May this year. It will indeed exist for the next 6 months. We will be evaluating it all the way through. And I think now, on both sides, there's probably an appetite to see what it might lead to in the future, and could there be a whole new model here. But I think I'll shut up for now, because that's the story.
Brilliant. Crucially, as Rowley's said, our partners in this were the Arts Council, with whom we've had a public value partnership for the last 4 years. It ends this year. What could we show? What could we do? At the heart of it all always was the idea of what could we do in terms of building skills and capacity within the arts sector, hence the Digital Capacity Training Programme. And then now we needed to show off. And I'm very pleased also that we have Denise Fay here, who is the Regional Digital Manager for the Arts Council in this neck of the woods, who's here to tell us really what they wanted to get out of it, why they were there, and really where they hope it's going.
Well, some of you may have heard of the Arts Council 10-year plan, which is really a very simple document. It's called Great Art for Everyone. And that's basically the mission that the Arts Council has had since 1946. It hasn't really changed. We want to get great art out there. We want everyone to be involved. And we've seen digital platforms as a way to make that happen. In 2009, we did a survey of the online content that our regularly funded organisations had available. And actually, it was very thin. There was very little rich content available from organisations that we funded. And this is a problem. This is public funds, and the work wasn't getting out there. So we were very clear that we had to develop funds or develop initiatives that could help that great art get out onto digital platforms. One of the ways that we did it was through supporting and being involved in the BBC Media Academy, which was about building up the digital skills of organisations. But similar to Rowley, we wanted to see real product coming out of those organisations. We knew that there was a learning curve in the arts sector, and the BBC partnership really allowed us to work together to develop those different projects. Okay, thank you. We were very lucky because the partnership has demonstrated that we do have shared values. We both wanted to reach a much wider audience and understand how audiences can engage with the arts on an entirely different platform. We also knew that we did have to build up the expertise and the skills in the arts sector who were used to developing live work, work in galleries, but not necessarily work on online platforms. We were also very clear that this was about experimentation. We knew that within a 6-month period, we had an uphill journey to ensure that some of the work that came out was of high quality, but also was able to really experiment with the organisations because they were developing content that they'd never really made before. We shared the BBC's view that the content or the art product that the arts sector has developed over the years needs to be publicly accessible. It's funded through public funds. We need to get it out there. And we were also lucky in that we had a relationship in which both of us wanted to ensure that there was a legacy within the arts sector, that the learning would continue in the arts sector, and that we could really build on this area of practice as potentially a new growth area for the arts in developing creative media. So when we set up the funding scheme, we put in 3.5 million of lottery funds. Because it's lottery, it does require an application process. And so along with that came a lot of bureaucracy that took time to develop and manage. We were looking for work in 3 areas. We were looking for work that was embedded within digital technologies that we termed as born digital, in which digital technologies were core to the development of that artwork. We're also looking at artwork or projects that could mediate the live experience or an existing art piece and which digital technologies could then develop that work as a new way of seeing it. And we also wanted to look at work in which, in a way, we were offering a documentary approach or an interpretive approach, a way to analyse existing bodies of work. So within that 6-month period, we really had our work cut out to get those applications in and, to see what would come out of that. We had about 500 applications. 700.
700, I think, yeah.
Oh, right. We had 700 applications. And initially we had put aside 2.5 million to support the project, but once we'd seen the quality of the applications and the organisation had recognised the potential of the space, we did put in another million and it went up to 3.5 million. We saw 5 projects come through in the Yorkshire region, one of which is the Sheffield Dockfest project that's launching tonight, but it's already, a preview is already online. I was going to show you another Yorkshire project. I'm not sure if is it up there? I'll leave showing the projects to Bill, actually. But I think the key thing that we wanted to get out of this was not simply another platform or another marketing tool for the arts. The organisations that have been involved in the space have really had to learn how to develop an entirely new artistic product, a new artistic experience, and consider who those audiences would be. And evaluating the success of both the audience experience and arts organisations' experiences in this process will be key to understanding how we continue to develop this work. But it's certainly a growth area for the arts.
Denise, thank you. And interestingly, yes, we had over 700 expressions of interest, which we whittled down through a long and painful process to 53. And some of the 53 organisations who were in receipt of money are here, which I'm very pleased about. Just so you all know, all of those 53 organisations have a BBC mentor, and it's through that process that quite a lot of the learning is happening. And there's been a huge amount of learning on all sides already in terms of actually how you make short films, how you digitise this stuff, how you get it up there. Lots of discussions about rights, lots and lots and lots of hard work on both sides. So the learning curve has already been quite steep. And crucially, a lot of the projects aren't just straightforward capture of films, they are quite complicated. You saw Will Self, he's reinventing the literary essay, so it's very much the idea of taking language and words and using it in a different way in an environment like this. So I'll hand over to Bill Thompson now, who's one of my colleagues, yes, you now, one of my colleagues who will talk very specifically about 3 of the more unusual projects.
Thank you. Where are they? Oh, right. Okay. I'm just going to start these playing in the background. So for me, that anybody here who knows me will know that my background is in digital tools and digital technologies and not so much the medium of television. I have a face for radio, as one of my producers once said. And so the real challenge for me of the space was how to ensure it didn't descend into being television. Because whilst there's an important video element in there, it's never intended to be a television channel. It's intended to be something which can take audio-video material, multimedia material, and other experiences and bring them all together into a framework and on a platform which gives each equal prominence. And I'm incredibly proud that we managed to do that, and I just wanted to show you 2 or 3 of the projects which go beyond just video and beyond just audio into highlighting some of the other multimedia capabilities. So this is the Faber and Faber 60 Years in 60 Poems. It's published to coincide with the Jubilee Lines anthology. We've taken the poems that were in that anthology and turned it into a visualization along with readings of the poem and with a lot of supporting material derived from BBC and other archives. And I think it's a really nice example of how to encourage people to explore poetry in a new way. And what's been very satisfying...
1960, Roy Fisher.
What's been very satisfying is that people are listening to the whole poem. That people are actually spending time and they're bothering to listen to the poems. And so it's been really, really pleasing. And as you can see, things happen on the screen. So it's not just your traditional poetry anthology. And I think that one's rather lovely. Another one, which is my personal favourite space project, is called The Listening Machine. And this came from an idea from a cellist, Peter Gregson, who some of you may know. Peter doesn't so much play the cello as use his cello bow as an input device for his laptop and generates sounds as a result. And he worked with the programmer Daniel Jones and the British Symphonia, fantastic small concert orchestra, to listen to Twitter. That is, to try to capture the emotional tone of Twitter and to reflect that as a continuous piece of music. The Listening Machine is a 6-month-long piece of music whose tone and sound is derived from the tweets of 500 people around the world. So you take those tweets, you analyse them for the subject matter, for whether they're positive or negative. Oh, sorry, I've gone on to the wrong one. You analyse them so that they are positive or negative, and you use that to create a piece of music. And the music itself comes from an enormous grid of samples and stuff recorded by Britten Symphonia and a few choirs. So it's real music. This is not machine music. It's not a Lou Reed type thing. It is an attempt to show what Twitter might sound like, or rather what the emotional tone of Twitter is. Now I'm just going to wait until it starts. As you can see, it's got the dials at the bottom to show you what its analysis is of the work that's actually happening there. And it's still going on. Please listen to it. Please listen to it for the next 5 months. Enjoy. Or don't. And then the third is our banker. This was the project that we felt would probably get some attention from the broader public who aren't so much interested in digital arts but who love John Peel. And this was the process of creating a digital representation of the John Peel archive, not digitising the John Peel archive. Because one of the things the space tried to do was to skirt round lots of issues which get in the way of projects. By commissioning work natively, we could assign the rights to the space for the duration of our project. And with John Peel, by not attempting to digitise the actual music, we could avoid a whole load of negotiations with the rights holders about whether or not we could actually play that music. So what we've done, or rather what the John Peel Archive team and Tom Parker have done, is to take the records in the collection, take 100 a week, show the front and back covers and any notes that John Peel might have written about them, and make them available in this multimedia experience. And then, when you get to a record, if it's available on Spotify or iTunes, you can listen to it. And that's another way in which we've tried to make this material available to people. So those are 3 specific space projects that are focused on making information available to people, making art available to people in different ways, and I think really complement the Globe to Globe Shakespeare's, the From the Land to the Sea and the Sea Beyond, all of the other great work.
And of course, as well as all the stuff that's unusual, another thing that we absolutely wanted to do very importantly was stream stuff live. And the very first weekend we were up and running, we had David Shrigley's opera Pass the Spoon from South Bank, and crucially, the Breaking Convention Festival, the hip-hop dance festival from Sadler's Wells. And Kingsley is here from Sadler's Wells because they were a key partner. In fact, they've got 3 projects overall, which are based in Sadler's Wells, produced by different companies, but with Sadler's Wells playing a part. So they're a key organisation for us. Kingsley's also working with us on the space for marketing and comms. But Kingsley will really talk about, for an organisation like Sadler's Wells, what's in it, but also the experiences from that first live stream of Breaking Convention. Kingsley.
I think it's interesting to hear about those other kinds of projects that Bill was talking about, but for the arts itself, generally, most arts organisations still very much work on the idea of around live attendance. So it's a very, very interesting thing with the space, because it's quite a culture shift. As I often said to them, our day job is running a theatre with all the things that go with that, putting on shows, and most arts organisations are very much focused on that. So there has been a real challenge around digital. A lot of the activities around digital have been often marketing-led, in terms of creating material to promote live shows. So the idea of creating content for its own sake is something that hasn't really arisen for lots of arts organisations. And so the space is a great opportunity to try and do that. And for us at Sadler's Wells, I think really in terms of the projects, it was a chance for us to really test out things. We already produce quite a lot of digital content. We probably do about 20 short documentaries a year, between 5 and 15 minutes long, on content we have on interviewing choreographers, artists, performers, and those are very, very successful. But so with this project, we really wanted to kind of test out the limits, really. So with Breaking Convention, which is a hip-hop festival that we run, we've been running it for 9 years. The ambition there was to really, rather than just capture what was happening on stage, whether we could grow it into something larger. So in the end, we were doing a live stream. It was a 6.5-hour live stream, which is something that obviously you could never do on television. We were filming in 6 different locations with a live vision mix happening. So it was quite ambitious as an idea. We set up a studio where we could interview the artists before they went on stage and after they came off stage to really get their viewpoint of what the experience was like. And so it was an interesting way for us to try out the idea of, can something like that be done? What we learnt from the process in terms of how ambitious it was, what kind of response we'd get from people, and how the artists also would take to the idea. The other projects that we're actually involved in are simply going to be testing out those ideas, really. I mean, we're doing a video for Wild Wild Girls, which is a British Bollywood musical that we're working on, and we've taken the idea of taking one of the songs, taking it onto the streets of London, increasing it to have a cast of over 100. So taking one song from a stage show that would have had a cast of 14, taking it out into a market, having 100 dancers from the community and doing a large-scale piece, but filming it with movie production values. So we've gone from 6.5 hours to 3.5 minutes, but in that one we're really putting all our energy into the highest quality production we can afford to do. And the third project that we're involved in, one of our associate artists, Russell Malafant, is recreating one of his pieces, a dance piece, for the camera in a studio. Again, when we've been involved in the past in filming stuff, we've tended to always work on the idea of capturing stuff in the theatre as a live experience. So it's very much giving you, I would say, the best seat in the house as the experience. What we're really looking at now is the idea of if you can recreate those pieces specifically for the stage, for the camera, and what that actually brings to those pieces. So I very much see the space as an opportunity to try out quite different propositions that I would never, ever be able to do, really because we just wouldn't have the budget to do it, and also because we wouldn't have the resources to be able to do those sorts of things when you're running a busy, busy programme. The Breaking Convention event was one that I think we'd love to recreate and do again. I think that, it makes absolute sense that an event like Breaking Convention, which is an international dance festival, should be shown to more people. It should be reaching out to people. We have artists coming from all over the world, and they've been very excited by the idea that you can still access material wherever you are in the world and get a chance for people to see that work. There are challenges around it. I mean, it has been quite tricky. The issue of rights is complicated. There's a lack of understanding within the arts sector about what it means in terms of rights. There's a lack of understanding from the artists. One was interesting about the hip-hop culture is the fact that people are very nervous about having their material up on websites, just because they're very conscious that if they develop a move, it can be quite quickly copied. And people then take that idea and redo it. And a lot of people invest a lot of time and energy in creating very, very specific moves. And there's a strong tradition in hip-hop culture of recognising the pioneers who invent things. But now what's happening is it's been thrown out there much wider. So that's been an interesting journey, and seeing how different artists relate to that. There are also interesting issues for arts organisations around the impact people sometimes perceive it has on sales. When we decided we were going to stream Breaking Convention over the internet, I had to make a clear decision that we were not going to worry about any effect it would have on ticket sales. I was confident it would not draw away from them, but I have heard other arts organisations get quite concerned over this, the fact that they think that will it poach their live audience. To me, it seems it will only enhance the idea. And in the end, there might be a vision going forward where for some events, the audience who actually see it live may only really be there for atmosphere, and actually the real audience could be a global audience watching all over the world. The other interesting challenge, I think, going forward is that arts organisations work on a different timeline to something like the space. So often, for me, my moment of real interest in breaking convention was in the build-up to the actual event. Once the event has passed, it no longer fits on my radar. I've moved on. I'm working on the Pina Bausch season. I'm working on other shows. But obviously, it still has a role on the space. And it's a challenge, I think, there for how arts organisations fit this into their timetable and how the space works alongside arts organisations to actually get them to actually see how it can support those organisations around their actual events. Because there will always be this desire to go, well, what will the space do to help my event be more visible to people? But I think that the most exciting thing really is the idea of being able to test things out and to really, really break boundaries. I think one thing that was very interesting looking through the list of people who were commissioned was there were some very, very exciting kind of challenging propositions there. And I think everyone accepts that not all of them will work. But I think it's very exciting to see what, and as a model as a pilot, I think it's going to have some very, very interesting learnings.
Of course, From the Sea to the Land Beyond will work.
Sure, that will, yes.
Two things to comment about that. One is that quite often we're discovering that the reasons people are scared about their stuff being up there, the artists, is nothing to do with problems around rights or problems around ownership. It's also about quality and them needing to see the quality of the film before they allow it to go out. So sometimes the reasons why they're nervous are not the reasons that we thought they might be nervous, which is one of the learnings we've already done. And just talking about breaking convention, the moment that sticks in my mind was when the director in the cabin outside said, "Camera 3, go to the 5th floor," and off he went, and there was no wiring up on the 5th floor in order to show the bits they wanted to show. So the speed with which a little team ran up with wires that went from one bit of a building to the other, and John Z.D. talked for ages whilst they did and plugged it in, and we then went to the 5th floor. So it was that thinking on the hoof which was completely and utterly amazing. This project, of course, is about partnerships. It's also about archive. One of the key things we wanted to do was start to release archive and indeed to work with other partners, major organisations. And of course, one of those absolutely is the BFI. Jane Grigson is head of content at the BFI, and they are, I think, by and large, apart from the Arts Council, the single most important partner. So, Jane, from the BFI's point of view, why are you there?
I'm not Jane Root, I'm Jane Giles.
Jane Giles, Grigson. Why have I written down
Grigson or Grigson? I'm not a cook either. BFI, I'm sure you know, is an archive. It's an exhibitor and a festival. It's a film and video distributor. It's a lottery funder for production and for P&A awards. These are all of the things that the BFI does now that the UK Film Council and the BFI have merged. The question of what the BFI wanted from this partnership with the BBC and the Arts Council, both organisations that we've worked with many times before in the past, but never quite in this constellation, was simply to be part of the experiment and the evaluation of how people view film on an online cross-arts platform. It was really that simple. What sits beyond the simplicity of that statement is all sorts of very complex questions about the meaning this year, this point in history of platforms. We know why people buy a cinema ticket. We know what it means to go to the cinema or to buy a DVD. We know a lot less about what it means to sample film on an online platform. We know a bit about value, but what does it mean to give away films owned as part of the national collection to the people of the UK and beyond for free when we're working within an arts organisation that relies on 60% earned income to 40% grant in aid? This is the sort of questions that we're dealing with at the moment. There's three parts to our engagement with the space. First of all, the BFI is a content partner in the space. We agreed to give somewhere between 10 and 25 hours of fully BFI rights-owned film onto the space in collaboration with the editorial guidance of Peter Manura, who is the editorial lead on the space. And we're showing everything from early silent Shakespeare adaptations through to the BFI production board films of the 1950s, the first films by people like Ridley Scott, Stephen Frears, Ken Russell, through to very recent lottery-funded fiction shorts by new emergent fiction film directors. Secondly, we are a commissioned company. The BFI applied along with the, how many other, 700?
Yes.
700 applicants. And we were awarded funding to do live streaming of the 2 of the silent Hitchcock features, which our archive has recently restored. The restorations cost the BFI £100,000 each. We've commissioned music for each of the 9 silent Hitchcocks. This is our big Olympic project. The music is very expensive for us to commission and record and perform, but the funding from the space has enabled us to broadcast live online the performance of The Ring by Sweta Kinch, the jazz musician, and Mira Calix, who's an electronic musician who's creating a score for the film Champagne in September. The third point of engagement that the BFI had with the space was quite simply as a business-to-business sales company. We sell archive film. Actually, the BBC is our biggest client, but we sell archive film to any body or organisation that wants to acquire it from us. There was a very magic meeting when the space called together its 50 commissioned projects, where Heather Kroll, who, as you know, runs the Sheffield Docfest, was talking about her project from the Sea to the Land Beyond. And I grabbed her and said, well, we've got a lot of amazing footage that's fully rights owned by the BFI of the coastline of the UK. Would you like to look at it? And that was an extraordinary moment, which has led to something that you'll see this evening. And at this point, I'm going to stop and I think pass over to the star of our show.
Yeah, I think that's right, the star of the show, Penny, whose film is being premiered this evening. We've got some stills, but Penny, if you just talk about what it meant for you to be able to work in this particular way.
Well, it's interesting hearing people talk about the bureaucracy, because as an artist, I would say it's the freest experience I've ever had, and I don't want the filmmakers here to kill me afterwards, because I got a phone call from Heather Kroll, and I was in the middle of making, in fact, almost finishing a film about a gang truce, which had been a very, very difficult, sort of fraught experience, in which I had the police, various gangsters, and the Channel 4 lawyers all over me all the time. So when Heather said, would you like to make a lyrical contemplative film out of the BFI archive, I just almost bit her hand off, and she was really surprised, you know. But I like the expression about the descending into television, because although there is something wonderfully democratic about television, there's a sort of tyranny of narrative and voiceovers and storytelling and repeating and telling people what they're about to see and then reminding them what it is, you know, which has become really the one of the things that as filmmakers we often feel very besieged by. And in this case, there was nothing. I mean, we didn't even have to tell a story. So what we had was a cache, quite a narrow cache, but absolutely beautiful, of BFI footage, which started in 1900. And Mitchell and Kenyon were, some of you may already know this, photographers in Blackburn, and their mission was to make local films for local people. And we went from their footage in 1900 through Topical Budget, which was a sort of newsreel, and then a lovely cache of COI, which is Central Office of Information, and British Transport films, which might all sound rather boring, but the directors were people like John Grierson, Humphrey Jennings, Peter Greenaway worked for the COI for 15 years, and we've used quite a bit of his film in From the Sea to the Land Beyond. So we had this, it was really magical, and although we didn't use any of the voiceover in these films was written by Graham Greene and Laurie Lee and Montague Slater, who wrote the libretto for Peter Grimes. So it was really extraordinary. And what we found ourselves making was, in fact, we ended up telling a story after all, which is the story of the century. And it starts, I think, in a very moving way where people don't really know what a camera is. So it's a sort of film history and a social history, where you get people coming up, seeing this big camera, and there's one shot where you actually see the person's hand cranking the camera, coming up and not really knowing whether they're having their photograph taken or what it is. So there's a very bemused look of them looking at us, looking at them, looking at us over 100 years. And it starts on Blackpool Pier, and it ends on Blackpool Pier with our contemporaries, who of course know exactly what a camera is and are speaking to it in a very different way. So we get both a relationship to history where you have wars, the rise of fishing industry, the demise of it, shipbuilding, and you also get a film history where you start with these very unwieldy cameras that can't really move into the most beautiful 35mm footage about shipbuilding, which is just poetry in action, really. And I'm sorry to say, once you hit the sort of 80s and the arrival of video, it all goes to shit again. So there was this shot, which you'll see, of sort of people drifting around a ship that's now a museum with audio guides, and they don't know what a ship is or what to do with it. And it's shot on video, and it looks absolutely terrible. And we ended up leaving it in the film because it really did seem to have a meaning, and it might not be a meaning that we could be very proud of in this room. But you know, it was a very unusually affecting experience. And working with British Sea Power, who, I mean, I tend to listen to either classical music or really headbanging kind of grime, you know. So sorry to say I didn't know them, but I've really grown to love their music, and we cut to the music and they've then composed a soundtrack for us, which I think is kind of really thrilling. So for me it's been a gift, and I think at one point it was raining all the time. I mean, I got a phone call 2 months ago, and Alex Fry, my editor, and I were sitting in the cutting room watching beautiful old black and white movies. It just felt somebody was going to come in and say, it was all a joke. So, it's been really wonderful to have that. And I suppose when you're talking about how things are consumed, of course, there's the live performance, and then I'm a bit apprehensive about the fact that it's being filmed this evening. I don't know what that's going to look like, you know, but that's a whole other life, I suppose, that it'll have. But I hope you enjoy the film. We really loved making it.
A whole other life. And for those of you who can't go and see the film, don't forget you can go on to www.thespace.org and see the live stream of From the Sea to the Land Beyond this very evening. And then, of course, the joy of the space is that it stays there. And so you've got until the end of October to have a look at it. But one of the things, and we've got 15 minutes, 20 minutes left, so hopefully there'll be some questions from the floor. But just to sort of bring the panel in again on the discussion, because one of the things striking, I think, about what Penny's just said is this whole business of enabling artists when working in partnership with other organisations to deliver something that they might not otherwise have done. And really, do you think that that's something that the BBC's maybe had to learn, which is about working with artists in a slightly, and other organisations in a slightly different way?
Well, I think, I gave a misimpression when we talked earlier on about the knowledge transfer aspect of this, so that was just like a one-way thing with the BBC revealing mysteries it knew about digital. The BBC, and I think the mentors who've been involved in this, have all themselves in different ways come to us and said how much they've learnt from the experience of working with arts organisations or the challenges they face. And so that's at a very local, personal level. Always, in the way I approach these things, I'm thinking, what are the good, unpredictable effects you unleash by projects like this? You know, something you do in one space, the space in this case, will have ripples back to commissioning editors, people watching, people, you know, I flinched when Bill said descended into television, because I love television. It's a great, great medium. But I know what penny means. I mean, in a sense, and I've been on both sides or all sides of this equation, and there's no question, just the disciplines within which the primary audiovisual medium in which documentary and other things occur, the scheduled television channel, are tough ones, whether they're commercial or even just the competitive ones of putting together a linear schedule. Even that point about duration, you realise how much you've internalised that and how liberating I think that's been for people in all sides to think about, if they are dealing in video, that they don't have to think about the tyranny of duration. Is it live? Is it not live? It can be either or both. Is it, to your point, is it a risky, uncertain-making combination of live relay and film, or is it the film itself? It's both, and the beauty of the space is people can have both experiences and sample it in different ways. So we talk about evaluation. Some of this happens, I think, in a kind of, it's like metabolizing in real time. I would hope, in addition to the real audiences we hope consuming and enjoying, we also have decision makers, producers, executive producers, commissioning editors, controllers, keeping an eye on what's happening here and thinking, how could this blend its way back into the mainstream of media? Not that is the end of this project. I think this project, in a sense, this is the end of the project. The point of this is to actually make new things happen. But I think it's a system, and I think it will change. I hope it will change.
And one of the interesting things as a team we're working in it, is that very fine balance between the extent to which you curate and take some sort of control and the extent to which you back off and let people, and how you avoid descending into television, or on the other side, how you avoid descending into chaos. And so there's a sort of very happy balance. But Jane, talking about known unknowns and things, even at this early stage, are there things that you think you're learning? You talked about conversations with Peter Manura, who's the overall curator. Are there things that you've already learnt that you hadn't expected to learn, or is it too early to say?
I think very broadly speaking, it's simply that some things can happen extremely quickly, like Penny making her film. Other things take very much longer than you think. And also, I suppose it's not to underestimate that actually everyone engaged in the space has got another day job that they're doing at the same time. So all I'm trying to say is that digital is on top of everything that we're doing. We're film and video distributors, and we're doing this on top of. And the question of where the money's coming from, as I keep on saying, it's great to give everything away for free and to work with Creative Archive. But who's paying for it, and where does the royalty come back in the end that continues to support the lives of the filmmakers who might have taken a discounted rate to work at a kind of like arts basic rate on the expectation of later earned income? If there is no earned income, then the whole structure is changing. So that's the sort of things that we're starting to think about.
Yeah, and the evolution of a business model is something we haven't even begun to think about really, or we are beginning to think about. But I think that's key about those lessons as to actually who pays for it going forward, and how you go back to how the money goes back to the content creators, the artists at the heart of all of this, because without them, of course, we are absolutely nowhere. And Kingsley, I think you made the point about marketing and the fact that you use digital for marketing. And one of the things we learned earlier on is that digital sits in different places in different organisations, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting actually, because who's taking responsibility for digital in arts organisations completely varies. I mean, the big focus up to now generally has often been around social media as a way forward in terms of driving audiences, but often the person who ends up managing the social media just happens to be the youngest person in the office, because they were the first person who knew what Facebook was or Twitter. And there's been lots of issues over how it's run and what you use it for. So it is a challenge, I think, for organisations in terms of where digital fits in, because there will also be this drive always to say, well, I could spend the money not on content, it could actually go on something happening on our stage. So trying to get people to prioritise that. And I think for the smaller organisations, I think what's interesting about the space is the idea of, for them, how they can, it's this idea of aggregating content. We know that there are lots of large organisations that can attract a following, but if you're a smaller organisation turning out content that, you know, maybe only one piece a year or something, it's by actually putting it in one place with other stuff that you can actually start to find an audience. And there's obviously a big desire, to actually get everyone looking at using digital. But I think for many organisations, they're often in the past producing stuff, but even then, it's how do you get it out there, how do you distribute it?
And indeed, Denise, for the Arts Council, do you think there will be something where it becomes incumbent upon people who are in receipt of grants to start recording stuff digitally as a matter of course, just in terms of building up a new archive, never mind, actually exploiting the old one? Is that something you think might happen?
There's already an expectation on organisations that are regularly funded that they increase their digital content and increase their social media profile. But in a way, I think the space is one step beyond that, really, in terms of just developing creative content as an ongoing part of their regular work. As yet, that isn't an expectation. But I just wanted to comment on something Kingsley said, and something around the idea of brand and aggregation. It's an anecdote, essentially. I was speaking to a family recently who were saying, we've got to get back this afternoon. The kids want to watch some hip-hop on the internet. I said, is that Sadler's Wells on the space? They were, no, it's hip-hop on the internet. And I realised this whole idea of the kind of walled garden that the arts, through branding, has tended to preserve actually goes against what we're looking to achieve through the space, and that long-term connection has nothing to do with the name of Sadler's Wells.
We're very, very free with our content. We share
Absolutely.
our content very, very widely.
Yeah.
So there is also an interesting debate about the idea of destination versus freely sharing and allowing it to go out there. And certainly for us, where we've actually talked about how we can let people know about dance, not many people actually actively want to seek it out. What we found is that when it's out there, they go, wow, this is amazing, and look at, so you've got to watch this. And it's as an art form, it's very hard to describe, but if you can see it, people get very excited. One issue that come up, actually, though, is interesting, that I thought was interesting also in terms of the BBC and the arts organisations. There was that very interesting discussion about, in terms of content and language and what it is, which, as an arts organisation, we're pretty used to people running around screaming, shouting, naked, doing this and that. And then this throws up a whole
load... And that's just in
of,
the production.
And this throws up all kinds of interesting issues from that point of view in terms of where, what you do on the space.
And it's interesting, of course, the editorial lead on the space is Arts Council England. It is not a BBC service. And that was a choice that enabled us not to have to work through the BBC's compliance, but rather for Arts Council England to get some experience of actually running a live service. And that's also been part of the education. For the BBC's point of view, it's education in keeping our hands off, which is difficult. And for ACE, it's a different sort of education.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? It's that balance between descending into television, and that applies to compliance, or just letting rip. And we take it on a case-by-case basis. And I have to say, and also interestingly, we are now working with Creative Scotland and Arts Council Wales and Arts Council Northern Ireland, so that they will be choosing things that they'll be doing this summer, which they will also bring into space, which gives it a national dimension as well, which is, of course, the thing that digital can do in a way, and platforms like the space can do in a way that other things can't. Bill's been tweeting, of course, all the way through this.
And I just actually wanted to ask Alexander Graham from Wall to Wall, who's been the funniest tweeter out there at the moment, pointing out that he felt being a TV producer at the Crossover Summit is a bit like being a farrier in 1850, attending a conference about railways, but he's going to console himself with his 7 million viewers. And Alexander, I don't know if you'd like to make a comment to the masses, wherever you're sitting.
You'll fess up.
Please stand up.
You don't have to. You don't have to.
I think we need to, I would just distinguish between the tyranny of conventional broadcast television, where I the tyranny of slots and the tyranny of commissioning editors and the tyranny of schedules, all of which I have profound sympathy with. I'm not sure I would go as far as to confuse that with the tyranny of narrative. I kind of think, a risky thing to say in this audience, but, call me old-fashioned, but I think narrative may still have something going for it. Shakespeare, Dickens, Hitchcock, EastEnders, etc. So, by tyranny of television, maybe. Tyranny of narrative, Penny, I'm not so sure. But
We've actually given masterclasses on the art of storytelling, which is exactly about that. And one of the most interesting conversations that we had when we first rang our shortlisted organisations, saying this is what we will be looking for, one of the first questions we asked them was, what will the audience see? And the number of times there was a deathly hush on the end of the phone as people thought, oh, because that first image and that narrative are all important in a way that they aren't in other things. But Rolly, you were going to say something.
No, I was only going to say that I mean, even if you look at the screen as it is, it's bursting with narrative, the space, and it is a meeting of cultures, not the replacement of one culture by another. And Susanna's absolutely right. In some of the new make stuff, there has been a bit of, discreet but firm editorial pushback from the space itself, just reminding people where it's appropriate about centuries of learning about what good storytelling is. And I think for me, actually, as a consumer, the thrill of the space is the ability to see in one place, cheek by jowl, pieces which are right out there, like the Listening Project or whatever it is, in terms of forcing you to think differently about an experience, alongside, there it is, Romeo and Juliet, one of the greatest beginning-to-end stories ever there, or indeed some of those BFI, the early BFI stories, Ridley Scott or whatever, where you've got absolutely classic gems of storytelling, which feel fresh as a daisy, and actually, again, is performing one of the things that digital does, which linear media finds harder, which is make old and new sit side by side as if they were both brand new. It's what happens in music now. It's beginning to do it with AV.
Penny.
I think I used the phrase the tyranny of narrative. In fact, I'm sure I did. I think it's more that people can fill in the spaces. I think what I was complaining about is having to tell everybody everything and not respecting that people are intelligent enough to sometimes join up the dots by themselves. And so telling a story without any words was actually, we did tell a story, but it was an amazing discipline, and it's been extraordinary to me how, even in the grade and so on, all the technicians, everybody understands the story without having to be told what it is. That's all.
I know there are some of our projects here. I'm just wondering, we've only got 4 minutes left, whether any of them would like to actually tell us what it's been like for them.
You're a brave woman.
Well, say I know. Well, you see. Well, hang on. I think you'll need a microphone. Oh, there's another one there. There's it. There we are. Thrilling, exhausting. What more can we say? And there, yeah.
Hi. My name is Paul Billinger. We're doing the Silito Trail. I think the space has been a fantastic experience, particularly in building up relationships so that we've been able to widen our appeal. We've been trying to reimagine Saturday night, Sunday morning in 2012, and we've done this in various ways. But one thing I am quite interested in as a learning experience is we've imagined the lead character from Saturday night and Sunday morning, Arthur Seaton, imagining how he would react to each of our commission writers. And we called one of the features Seaton Rifles, so obviously a play on the song. When it got uploaded, it was changed to Arthur Seaton Rifles. And where I have a very slight concern is that I feel that sometimes our work, where we've thought about a title, is being over-edited, or people are being a bit too explicit with explaining things. And I guess that's what we would learn together. But I do kind of wonder, I can't imagine people messing about with Will Self's words in the same way.
Oh no, that's happening, don't worry.
There's quite a lot of conversations about that one going on, trust me. But do any of the panel want a last word? Otherwise, I think with a minute and a bit to go, where we've done exceptionally well on timing. A last word from anybody? No. Brilliant. Oh! Yeah. Yeah.
Bearing in mind that the Arts Council and the BBC are publicly funded, is this research going to be made open to everybody?
Yes.
How and where?
Basically, where we are at the moment on the evaluation is we are beginning that process, and we're using various analytic tools in order to get that stuff. We will be having a big conference at the end of all this and sharing all that information. And we will also be sharing some of it with the 53 and probably making it widely available before that.
But in you can track those analytics
Yeah.
from last weekend.
Yeah.
Isn't there an argument for making it all open to everybody as it happens? I mean, we were talking about social media. Culture 24 did a great study last year, which said that of the top 100 heritage organisations, only 2 of them, the Roundhouse and can't remember the other one, got any influence at all driven by teams in social media. So, you know, that's something that came out in the report, but actually could have happened, you know, everybody could have known as it was going on. So it seems to me that there's an opportunity to have live research out there for the audience, or for, you know, all our the organisations we're working with at the moment to try and drive their digital strategies.
Well, I certainly think we can go back and look at how we can make it available more quickly than we are, and how we start collating all of that stuff, because we're looking at sort of patterns of behaviour emerging. So once we've got a clearer set of sort of figures and things, then I think absolutely we should think of doing that. Okay. There is one, only if it's very quick.
With your data, maybe if you could open it up to everybody, then we could come up with some really good ways of representing it, and maybe crowdsourcing how we analyse the data, because we're all working in the media sector, so I'm guessing we're all pretty broke, but we are also very innovative.
Well, that's another thought. I shall take that away and do that. So, cool. Penny, Kingsley and Bill, and see you all later, and thank you very much.
There's an element, if you're aware, of what you wish for.